Welcome to Tirade of Truth. This is our first actual live show type video where we have a interview. We did do our first show video test type of thing last Saturday, Indian time. So it would have been Friday night, probably in the middle of the night, Eastern Standard Time. Now, a lot has happened since then. I mean, I wanted to do some videos through the week, but I mean, there's just so much happening, and there's so much happening so fast that I mean, I should really be doing at least a video or two a day. I mean, but well, you know, we're just getting things started. I'm trying to work on the website and get it up, and I mean, you know, it's so I figured what I would do is do another video this weekend. Now, I was going to do it yesterday, but my guest was in Delhi yesterday at a speaking engagement, so we decided to do it this evening. Now, we're running live here on live stream. I'm a very new show. I mean, we don't have a huge following on live stream or what have you. We do have our Facebook page, Tirade of Truth, facebook.com/Tirade of Truth. We are in the midst of building the website, or I'm in the midst of building the website, tiradeoftruth.tv or tiradeoftruth.com, which will be up and online soon within the next couple of weeks. But until then, we're going to go ahead and try and get our just get things going. So that was our interview, our guest. So what I'll do is call them back in a minute. It's Harbir Singh, and he's a writer, thinker, political and social activist, engineer, banker, and farmer. He studied and worked in the United States for over a decade and a half before returning to India, where he is now indulging in his pleasures of reading, debating. He tends to his farm. Someday he hopes to write a book that explores the Indian soul. So I'm going to go ahead and call him back here on Skype. And with so much going on, it will be an interesting conversation. There's just so many things happening that it'll be good to get another perspective. So, hello, Harbir. I'd like to thank you for coming on the show. You're our first guest, and we're a new show that we're just starting. I'm, just trying to. I feel that we need to kind of counter the mainstream media agenda of what the talking points and the narratives that are basically all across the world. I mean, they're all following the same things. And being here in India as a Canadian has really opened my eyes to a lot of what is the bigger picture as far as the global narrative of what's actually happening in the world, opposed to what in North America we think the world is. And it's a lot bigger and a lot more complex place than a lot of us in North America think. I think that we tend to, especially Canadians, think that the world is like us and that it's a great place of rainbows and butterflies, and that's not necessarily the case. Now, I know that you've seen this coming for quite a while, so what I'd like you to do is just basically kind of give an intro on who you are, and some of your thoughts on what you see and how you saw this coming and how you think it will play out in the next little while.
Thanks for having me on the show, Chris. I appreciate that. You're absolutely right. The world really is changing, and I say that there's something that I would call the post-Second World War liberal order is is that it's not just about a president who's, quote, slightly nuts, but about a very profound change that's occurring in the world.
Yeah.
And I think that for us, it's important to discuss what's going on so we can put into context, the various events we're seeing, whether it's Trump or Brexit, or suddenly the rise of Marine Le Pen in France. Mm-hmm. And I think broadly what we're looking at is that I'll say again, the liberal order, which is, the idea that came out of the Second World War of people interacting without regard to their identity and to suppress the idea of, nationalism and to create a world that was interconnected, in which people interrelated without being judged for their color or their identity or their race or their religion. That was the ideal of this that came out of the Second World War.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're looking at is that experiment seems to have run its course as the movement of the left and liberalism fell into the hands of what I would call a globalized elite. Folks who live in ivory towers in Washington and Delhi and New York and London. Folks whose jobs will never get outsourced to China. People who never have to prove their worthiness to be, employed at a factory or whatever it is. Folks who've developed I'd say, a degree of contempt for ordinary people, even as they took to wearing their own morality on their sleeves. Well, if I'm looking after immigrants, then I'm a good person. If I'm looking after gay rights and women's rights, I'm a good person. But if the rights of women or gays are being violated in some other country, well, that's not my problem. And the reason that it has come as such a black swan and unforeseen event is that, as you said, folks became so absorbed with the idea of reality that they had in their minds. Like, if you're in America and that's the way the world looks to you. If you're in Britain, that's the way the world looks to you.
Yes.
And we arrived at a place where factors and forces in the world that the liberals of the West didn't even think mattered have suddenly brought themselves to the fore in the world in a way that the liberal order is now unable to cope. So, I mean, how does it happen that China becomes so important and so powerful and so wealthy without having guaranteed any of the aspects of human rights and all of that? So, I mean, did democracy not matter? I mean, does liberalism and pluralism not matter? China doesn't allow immigration. China doesn't have policies for refugees. China doesn't care about environmental protections. China doesn't care about looking after the ethnic minorities of Xinjiang or Tibet or whatever it is, and yet they have a place at the world table without having to pay any price for any of that. And it's the trouble that the world is facing with radical Islam. How does it happen that Saudi Arabia can run such a worldwide project of the resurgence of a particular kind of Islam that the Saudis think is the way it ought to be, and they get away with it?
Well,
while
something I want to ask, and
Sure.
you make such a great point, because earlier I was talking about how, as a Canadian, and I see people in North America, and how a lot of people, like you make a great point, a lot of people are waking up, but a lot of people are still asleep and living in this reality that is not real, and they've become complacent in what they believe to be true, or what they believe the world to be. Now, do you think that that's the same sort of thing, but on a personal level, that actually is the same thing that happened with the elites, but even more so because they were never truly checked? I mean, we have a prime minister in Canada who is, all about, he says he's a feminist, but he'll sit in a Sunni mosque.
Right,
he'll be
right.
at a gay rights parade. He'll
That's right.
put on any hat that he needs to in order to sell, but I think he honestly believes this stuff in his head. And I think he honestly believes it because he's never been checked. He's lived in a bubble where no one has ever checked his beliefs, or he's had to come confront those beliefs, or surrounded himself with yes men his whole life, and a lot of these elites have done that. I mean, they've traveled the world and been to Delhi and China and these places, but they don't actually get out into the street and talk to people. I mean, they live in this bubble, right?
No, that's exactly right. I mean, this is it's not just Trudeau. This is it is symptomatic of the general failure of the liberal left.
Yes, exactly. I
With,
was just using him as a
right,
current
right.
example.
See, this is a paradox that ultimately felled liberalism.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you care about women's rights, how can you care about women's rights in Toronto but not in Addis Ababa? So
Or how do you have a woman's march like what they called it last weekend, but
that's right.
not include a whole segment of women who say you don't speak for me, and wearing these hats? And I mean, it's not really a woman's march. It was more an anti-Trump march, if we're going to be honest. I mean, pro-life women or anti-abortion women were not included. They were actually told, don't come. We don't want you here. I mean,
No,
that's it in itself an issue. I mean, identity politics to the point that it's like you're not allowed at a women's march, and we speak for all women. And then you have women like Madonna up there talking about, bombing the White House. The same Madonna who, was talking about giving blowjobs for Clinton votes, and just sickening things that the majority of normal women say, you do not speak for me. And I think that's another example in another way of how the elite think that they live in this world, but they've forced us into this globalism that is the way that they thought it should be, that has benefited them. And then there's the real people. Like you're an Indian and you were in America and you were an immigrant. I'm
right,
currently in Mumbai. I'm a Canadian and I'm an immigrant. And
right.
I mean, we hear all these narratives on the television about, anti-immigration, and Trump is so hateful. And I mean, we haven't
See,
even been able to given the guy a chance yet. I mean, I'm an immigrant. I had to leave and go home to Canada in October to literally get off the plane, go to the Indian embassy, get a stamp, and I could have just came right back. Just because that's the rules. I mean, it sucked, but hey, I did it. We had to leave our home in New Zealand because, things changed and the job didn't work out and time was running out, and those are the rules, laws. And I'm all for immigration. I'm an immigrant right now. But I think that just trying to save the world and just bringing in people that don't necessarily assimilate well. I mean, this is a foreign culture to me, and I love it, and it's great. Don't get me wrong. But at 37 years old, I'm not an Indian. I'll never be an Indian. You know what I mean? I'll never
That's right.
change
That's right.
and become that.
So I mean, you touched on 2 points, which is the Women's March thing and immigration, and I'd like to address them one by one. So let me
Yes.
first touch on the Women's March thing. You see, this connects to what you said earlier about how Americans and Canadians and various other types don't understand the larger world that they live in. Now, when I was growing up in a village in India, I remember that the women of the village would be covered up. Their faces would be covered with something we call ghungat, and they would not appear in front of the men without covering their faces, because to show their faces to the men was to become objects of lust for those women. And it was a barrier between those women and men, even when there was no such need. And the fight that we have had in India for the last 30 or 40 years in terms of women's empowerment is to let women, take off their veils, wear short skirts if they want to, to not cover up in XYZ way to preserve their dignity. So, our march towards freedom and liberation of women has been to, grant them the freedom to be free. And this goes side by side. We see pictures of, Tehran in the 50s or Kabul in the 70s, and you see these Muslim, Afghan, and Iranian women walking around in skirts and, shirts with collars that are open, and we have seen this dark veil descend across the Middle East, and even in Kashmir in India, where, women who are previously free have disappeared into burqas at the command of mullahs who are, bringing a very rigid Taliban kind of an Islam across the world. And to have seen pictures of how liberation was in Tehran and Kabul, and having lived, a life having watched the liberation of women in India, to now see hijabis in Washington claiming that it is the right of women to cover up and be veiled, and that is feminism. And that is women's power. I can't believe it. Like, what surreal reality have we arrived in, where to cover up on the mall in Washington has become the symbol of liberalism? It's like Saudi Arabian engineered social transformation towards Islamism is sweeping the West,
Yeah.
and liberals are sitting around and having a hissy fit about Trump. Like, don't you understand what's going on?
No, and it's
So,
it's brutal.
so,
Great, go ahead. You make such a great point.
so I think what's happened is that we really honestly, I mean, I'm probably going to get laughed at for this, but I think what we're looking at is uh, Trump is not the new right. Trump is the new left. Because the left, as it was, they betrayed us, the left.
Hmm.
So let's look at Trump. Trump's, who's he bringing out? Tulsi Gabbard, Hindu Hawaiian Democrat woman who has served in Iraq and elsewhere, and speaks the language of liberalism that liberals should always have spoken.
Hmm.
His representative at the United Nations is Nikki Haley, who is a convert to Christian of Sikh immigrants from India. Her name's Randhawa, Namrata Randhawa. Now, what we're looking at is, if Donald Trump is going to go tangle with the world now, and he's going to,
Yep.
as with George Bush and George Bolton, George W. Bush and his UN representative John Bolton, the representative of the UN is a very central figure for the US president in dealing with the world community. And he has put a woman of color, of immigrant descent, of international experience, as his leading weapon in the middle of the UN,
Yep.
and a woman. And so the people turn around and say that, oh, he's a misogynist and the hijabis in Washington are correct. Like, what the heck are you people doing?
Yeah, and they're not even talking about that. That
That's right.
they refuse to even acknowledge that. Really, I mean, you might see a teeny little piece somewhere if you scan every news channel all the time. I mean, the same
That's right.
narrative is being done over and over and over again. I mean,
That's right. That's right. This is, I mean, look, the fact of the matter is that with the Iraq War and all of that, the Republican establishment went off the rails and into deep corruption.
I agree.
They started a war and caused a war that could not have achieved anything ever. They ended up indebting the U.S. to China. So many people died. Millions everywhere died. America is now burdened with so many soldiers who are traumatized by war.
Yeah.
And then the Democrats endorsed that. And Donald Trump is, I believe, a liberal in the true Brooklyn, New York sense. He's not a Bible-thumping, nut job from Alabama. He's a smart man.
Yeah.
And I think that what he's done is he's taken over the Republican establishment first. He defeated the Republicans on their turf.
Yep.
Took over their establishment and is now taking the fight to the Democrats.
Yep.
So I think we're looking at a new pole, a political pole forming, which involves elements of the left and the right, without any of the garbage from the left and the right. And he's having to, pander on some things, such as the wall and all that, and he's doing that. But I think that that Trump is it's like, Rome was burning while Obama was fiddling, fiddle as in the violin.
Yeah.
And what you get is Trump.
Well, the
And
whole
I think
order has been toppled. I mean, your average the whole left is done at this point almost. They're flailing in the final twitches of death almost. I mean, and it's getting violent and vile. Really, I mean, it's really getting violent and vile. And I think that you're right in that aspect of Trump. But I also think that. And here's the thing: I'm a born again Christian now. Now
Okay.
I was not a Christian my whole life until I was about 31 years old. I actually went to a Catholic school. Wasn't a Catholic. I mean, I saw a lot of the wrongs of Christianity. Now, I think with Trump, though, a lot of his cabinet and people around him, Mike Pence, for instance. Now, this is traditional America, right?
Right.
Traditional evangelical America, which is still a huge, strong voice in America. That's the culture, so to speak, in middle America. Now, there's lots of ills of it. It's been so misrepresented throughout the world. I think, Christianity it's got lots of ills. It's been very misrepresented.
Now look, Chris, if I may interrupt,
Yep.
I don't think that now is a time for you to have to make any excuses. Okay. I am
Yep.
I am a guy who was in America in college, and various proselytizing folks would show up. Oh, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, and you should become a Mormon, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And with the Discovery Institute trying to, have the teaching of evolution shut down. So I've had my share of battles with the Christian conservative right in the U.S.
Yep.
However, that said,
Yep.
the unfortunate reality we're looking at is that Samuel Huntington's idea, clash of civilizations, that moment has arrived.
And you're so right in what you're saying, because the thing is he is protecting that, I think, whether he believes it or not, because it's the culture of America, and knows the war that's happening. And it's true. I mean, anybody who knows anything about what's going on in Europe or the West in general, is there is an attack on the traditional family. There's an attack on the traditional values, and we've been told in the West that we need to put our head down and be ashamed of things that we didn't do, and all these other things. I mean, I get called a racist all the time, and it's like, man, I'm trying to tell people about certain things, and they don't want to hear it, and they rather just dismiss me and say you're a racist, or you're a Christian, or turn that against me, or what have you. And I'm like, I understand your point of view because I used to have it. But there is a real threat here. I mean, you don't necessarily understand what Islam is about, what its teachings are, and how it's full on trying to take over and win this war in so to speak, in another way, in a smarter way than what they saw the communists do, or what have you. So and back to culture. I mean,
let me just comment on what you just said.
yep.
So now here's where we find ourselves. I think that we have arrived at a situation which, the words that I will use will probably, get me written up as a Bill O'Reilly type of character, or perhaps not. But I think what we're looking at, if you look at Trump, Brexit, Marine Le Pen, Geert Wilders, and Putin. Putin's a very important bit here. I think what we're looking at is that Christendom, Christians, the Christian world is, rearranging itself, realigning itself to align itself along what is its common axis, which is its Christian identity, because the enemy it faces is communist China and Saudi Islamic Republic of Pakistan and Saudi Arabia and all these guys.
Yep.
And the unfortunate reality is that the order of the world that had come to be, post-national, the UN and the World Trade Organization and
Cultural Marxism.
the EU, and everyone's welcome because we're all blah blah blah. That the individual nations, U.S., Canada, France, have not proved able to stop these civilizational tides that are coming from China and centered around Saudi Arabia. So for the West to face these tides, they're going to have to realign along what is common to all of them, which is essentially their Christian identity.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that people are saying that we're going to go to war for Jesus.
Yeah.
That's not what's happening. But what is happening is that the reality is that the Western world is civilization based in a certain Christian ethos, and that is so many great things of modern civilization, Magna Carta, XYZ, all of that come out of that.
Yes.
So America and Britain, I'll tell you, Britain starts this. The English started because the English are the ones who first put their stake in the ground with Brexit. England is weak. England's not America. England doesn't have a lot of weight to throw around in the world, and yet
not today.
That's right. Obama says you're going to go back to the end of the line. And they say, okay, America's not with us, the EU's not with us, no one's with us, but that's okay because this is who we are and we will stand by it.
Yeah.
And that is has happened in America, and it's going to happen in Germany. And this is now the Western civilization regirding in a new configuration to face the civilizational challenges that are coming from the East and from the Middle East.
And I think you're totally right. I really worry though, because we're up against it in so many regards. I mean, you talked about Islam and China's communism is still an issue. I mean, it didn't die in '89. I mean, it's still
No, it did
there.
not. No, it did not. Right.
It's still there. It's still an issue. But then we have cultural Marxism at home, which is pretty much won at this point. I mean, at home, everyone suffers from so much self-guilt of things they didn't do. It's so skewed in the sense that colonialism is 100% bad in the West, and that's not true. I mean, as an Indian especially, I'm sure you'll be able to tell me a lot of the ills of colonialism, especially in India. I mean, this is a perfect country to show, but we talk about the battle for the West or democracy. India is part of that. We share so many values when it comes to freedom and democracy and the values that we share, that it doesn't even have to be about religion. I mean, it's a big, huge part of it. But, I mean, whether we're Hindus or Christians or Buddhists, I mean, we all will be killed by Islam. I mean, we all have been killed by Islam in the past. And the Pakistan-India experiment, so to speak, is a great example that most people in the West have no idea about. I didn't surely know a lot about it. I still have a lot to learn. But what I have learned about it is just broadened my views in the sense that we see this chasm in 1948 of a country that was one people. They were one blood. They're one race, but their culture is totally schismed.
You see, Chris. Let me answer that. Broadly speaking, as a country with, as a citizen of a country with a very long experience with Islam, both positive and negative, I want to make clear that I don't have a problem with Islam as such, and I'm not being politically correct here.
I'd like to make that too. I don't have a problem with Muslim people. I don't have a problem with anybody practicing their religion how they see fit. My problem is with the ideology that comes with it. I mean, even the Roman Catholic Church, I will call out as such. Power corrupts.
Allow me, Chris, if I may, for a minute. Here's what we're facing. If we go to any roots of any religious text that comes from an ancient, less civilized past, we are going to find things in it that are going to be appalling, and that I think is true for every religion. What matters is how strictly its adherents are devoted to following the letter of very ancient law. And I think that the world has moved on from that kind of barbarism. And I would say that Islam also had made progress. So as I mentioned, Tehran and Kabul had women who were free. This was not a problem. My family are migrants from Pakistan, and virtually the entire generation that were the refugees who went through, that horror. Virtually most of who have now passed away, their story was, well, this was completely unexpected. This is not who our neighbors were. This is not what our experience of our Muslim compatriots was. What's important to note here is that what has happened is that in the early 20th century, a particular kind of interpretation of Islam, which is very nationalistic in the sense that Muslims are one people all over the world. It doesn't matter whether you're Malaysian or American or Indian. It doesn't matter who the hell you are. The only thing that matters is that you're a Muslim, and that you are the scion of conquerors, and Islam will rule the world again, and it is our job to make it happen. Now, this kind of sentiment started rising in the world in about 1905, somewhere around there. And it has, spread. It spread and created Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia has spent the last, Saudi Arabia, desert savages. Suddenly they get oil, and America, in its post-imperial, experiment in goodness, decided that taking the poor man's resources was too much like what had happened to the Native Americans. And it was too much like what had happened to people in India and Fiji and wherever. So America was going to be different, and they weren't going to just take the oil from the primitives who had it. They were going to pay them for it. So what we ended up was a situation where the most regressive-minded people who were still living in the 7th century ended up with trillions of dollars, and now whatever their obsolescence as a people had condemned them to, desert savages, because that's all they are. Suddenly, anything that civilization would have given them, which is prosperity and money and all of that, they got it for free without having to earn it. And they set about spending that money to radicalize Muslims around the world by spending money building mosques, training mullahs to go preach this message of every Muslim is the same and hate everyone else. So Saudi Arabia has spent the last 50, 60, 70 years spreading hatred in the world that I'm afraid the world has been unable to check. And now we find ourselves in a place where there are Muslims who are, there's a friend of mine called Tariq Fatah. I'm sure you'll have him on your show at some stage. He uses the term Allah ka Islam and Mullah ka Islam. Allah is the Islam of Allah, which is that, so Islam has 5 tenets, that be charitable, pray, do Hajj if you can, a few simple things that are quite benign.
The 5 pillars.
That's right. So that as far as Tariq is concerned, he believes that if you follow those 5 tenets of the faith, you're a good Muslim and you don't need any more than that. And then there are the Mullah ka Islam, those who are saying that the leaders of the mosques and the muftis are the ultimate arbiters between God and the Muslim, and those guys under Saudi instructions are going around preaching hatred for everyone. And Muslims have fallen, I won't just say prey to, but are unable to combat these folks. So there's a radicalism that has come into the world from the US to India to Malaysia that really poses the existential challenge that all of us face. So it's not that, that we are haters of Muslims or we want to be go on new crusades like for Christ or anything like that. It's just that we all try to be inclusive to everyone, and we have been answered by a brutal intolerance that now has to be dealt with.
It's like being in a fight with your hands tied behind your back. I mean,
that's right.
And also, I see a lot of parallels between the Roman Catholic Church and early Christendom and the control of the church and the scriptures. And it was in Latin. And I mean, we had to have what was called the Reformation for people to be able to read the New Testament for themselves. I mean, you had a church that would take money to absolve sins. You had a church that said there's God and then there's me, and then I tell you what God says. I mean, that is the same sort of thing as what we see today in Islam.
That's exactly right.
And I have no problem calling out the Roman Catholic Church and the history on that, especially as a Christian even, because that's what made me never want to be a Christian. But once we had the Reformation and we got the printing press and we could read those scriptures for ourselves, not long after came the Enlightenment. Not long after came freedom. We've had a Reformation. We've built civilization. And the Christian New Testament and Jesus himself is a totally different thing and a totally different teaching than the Church of Roman Catholicism. Now, we have allowed other, and it's been misused, but it's to the point now that we've had that Reformation, we've grown, we're a civilization, we're now a secular civilization, and I'm even all for total separation in schools of no prayer, and I mean, that's totally fine with me. But now we're up against the same sort of thing, but today, in this generation, and like you said, the 7th century almost, it's almost like that same where Christendom was back then, and the control and the power to the normal people and the brainwashing.
This is exactly right. Now, see, I'll go back to my Saudi and oil money example. Let us assume for a second that oil had not been discovered in the Middle East. Let's go to that hypothesis. Then what would have happened was that Muslims would have been in the world, integrated into their countries as they always have been, because they would have been amongst the people that they have lived with for so long.
Yeah.
And you go to your mosque, I do go to my temple, and that's what it is.
Yeah.
Now, the example that you mentioned is very, very correct as far as a Roman Catholic Church is concerned. There is a total and complete inability in the Muslim community to take on the clergy that has made itself the keeper of the faith and the keeper of the flock.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that the clergy goes to the doctrine and jurisprudence of texts that people cannot read and cannot interpret and cannot resolve the paradoxes of. So the clergy is free to dictate and demand from the flock whatever they want, and the flock is unfortunately having to follow.
Yeah.
And this is something that in Christianity, you can make fun of the Pope and nobody was going to, get upset with you.
No.
But you dare not do that as a Muslim,
Well, and I mean, try it though in the 12th century. I mean,
Exactly.
It wouldn't have happened. And a lot of people go on about the Crusades, and I mean, they don't understand that was a defensive thing after 400 years of Muslim aggression at that time, when Muslims were very new to the earth. Now,
Right.
also, a lot of people don't understand that the teachings of the church were totally counter to what the book taught, actually. I mean, when Martin Luther had the Reformation, and when the whole Reformation came, a lot of these burnings at the stake were of people...
If I may interrupt for a second, Chris,
Yep.
I think that here's where I think, what I mentioned about Trump represents a new pole of both the left and the right. Here's what I want to get at about what we're talking about. Even though we said that this is about Christendom getting together and realigning itself to face the civilizational challenge presented by Islam, what we don't want to get into is the tenets and doctrine and history of Christianity.
Yeah.
What we want to get into is being clear about and defending the values that Christians have arrived at today.
Exactly.
Freedom of speech, liberty of women,
Yep.
dignity of all individuals, tolerance, pluralism. If whatever Christianity was, right or wrong, did right, did wrong, whatever it was, what has been the net outcome of that till today? What can you say that because the Christian world has these values are worth defending?
Yes.
If those values, as I mentioned, freedom of speech, freedom of faith, freedom of religion, freedom of individual choice, who you want to marry, whether you want to cover up,
Yes.
who you want to mock,
Yes.
the right the right to marry or love whoever you want, not get thrown off buildings for XYZ, not get stoned.
Yes.
The dignity to not have your head chopped off in the public square. Everything that Christianity has been through.
Yes.
What has been the net outcome of that today is what has to be defended. The doctrinal details are not to be bothered with because that's history.
Yes, exactly. No,
Defend the West as it is today. That's what I would say.
And I mean, and the point was too is I mean, they would kill their own too. I mean, if you were trying to teach your kid to read the Bible for yourself, you were a criminal and you were burned at the stake. I mean, and the same goes on today in Islam. If you detour at all, I mean, Tariq Fatah, I have one of his books. He's a personal friend of yours. I have so much respect for the work that he does. He's addressed Parliament back home. I mean, he's tried to talk to Canada about the truth of this matter, and he's
been very successful. I believe that it was his efforts that prevented Sharia from being introduced into Canadian law, and I think that was an absolutely huge achievement that Canadians should know about and appreciate.
Yeah, no, and they're not done though. They're trying to bring it back again, but again,
I think it's too late. I think it's too late.
He has death threats all the time. I mean, just a week or so ago, he on live television was threatened with death again. So if you deviate at all and try to say I'm a Muslim, but I'm a Canadian first, or I'm a Indian first, or I believe in freedom first, even. I mean, you can't even be a Muslim and a Pakistani and say I believe in freedom without being attacked. I mean, to the point that Tariq Fatah has even been demonized in the mainstream Canadian CBC left-wing media, and same here in India even. I mean, to the point that they try to demonize somebody who's telling the truth because they don't want to hear the truth.
I think that Tariq is probably the bravest man that I know. And the reason for that is that uh, there are many who think as he does in the Muslim community, and I have no end of Muslim friends who all are aligned with Tariq
Yeah.
in terms of the broad agreement on where the community has gone wrong and who is the enemy within the community, and how the entire community is suffering the opprobrium of the entire world. But no one can dare say anything
Yeah. They're
except
too
for him
scared.
because yeah, because the fact of the matter is that violence and the threat of violence, if you can deliver it credibly and easily, will silence any tongue. And
And not even just the threat of it, but I mean they're
the reality
serious.
of it.
Yes, the
That's
reality.
right.
They're serious about it.
That's right. That's see the thing is that Theo Van Gogh was killed. Salman Rushdie had to live under protection
Yep.
for so very long. When the threat of death and violence is very real. And here's the thing: the ones who make it only being very sure that they mean it.
Yep.
Otherwise, it has no effect, and
Yep.
it is very effective. I don't know if you remember there was the Jalan Poston cartoons of the Prophet. Now, the Yale University Library brought out a book about that entire controversy. And the book about the controversy created by those cartoons does not have the cartoons in the
In it.
book.
Yeah.
So they very effectively managed to censor Yale University. The freedom of the press of the West and Western academia and Western universities was shut down by the threat of which academic, which press employee, who would get killed, and who would take the responsibility for it.
Yeah.
And do you want to be responsible? Well, I decided that we're going to publish this, and now my sub-editor is dead because I made a decision. What am I going to say to his family about what the decision I made?
Yeah.
So the threat of death to silence critics is
It's
very real.
it's always been real, and it's
That's right.
always been there, and that's what
That's right.
really bothers me about people, especially back home, is they don't want to talk about these issues. I mean, and it's not comfortable to talk about these issues. I mean, I had somebody say to me, "Well, you better watch what you say." I mean,
Right.
you live in India. I mean, and you know what? That's fine. I mean, because to me, we have a duty to the generations past that go back so far from, I mean, the Reformation to World War II. I mean, what did my grandparents storm the beaches for? If we're just going to put our head down because we don't want to talk about the same exact thing but in a different form and get behind those people who are trying to do for their communities and humanity as a whole what we already did and what we've already had to do, to the point now it's even threatening the Western world itself. I mean, look at Europe. I mean, we all, in the 40s, our grandparents, Indians, Canadians, Australians, Kiwis, I mean, we all got together and had to fight an evil that the threat was very real. It's still real. It's always been there. And bullies will never, ever stop. They always need to be pushed back at. And if we don't do that, our children or our grandchildren are going to have to, we'll have to look them in the eye one day. I'm not even a parent, but just the future of humanity, we have an accountability to, and as well as that past.
Look, you're absolutely right. The thing is that the world has unfortunately arrived at a place where you must now defend it or lose it.
Mm-hmm.
It's as simple as that. And again, I will say that I don't want to keep it centered on Muslims and Islam, because I really
No.
do believe that it is a two-pronged. It is China and Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And
Well,
and and the
I'll add cultural Marxism and the self-hate of the West itself that gets pushed through the universities and the left-wing media, etc. I see that
you
as a
see
huge
that
issue
is
as well.
I agree, but the thing is that you see how do I put it? We have the machinery of the world that functions, and then we have a cloak on top of it. The cultural Marxism that you've mentioned is the cloak that sits on top of the machinery of the world.
Yes.
And it's time to pull away the cultural Marxist cloak and to look
Yes.
at what's really inside.
Because it's the lie. It is indeed
Right.
just a
But
mirage and a lie. And if people can look past and get past that fear, then they can then help those who are fighting against the real threats, which are the ones that you just named.
I think it's very important to dispense the lie, but not to become obsessed with the lie.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you become obsessed with the lie, then you are not focusing on the real problems as much as would be needed. Because face it or not, if the US is in deep trouble, look, let's be realistic. Even though we are saying Islamic terrorism, Saudi Arabia, blah, 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 if we look at it in terms of the real, actual physical damage done to the United States,
Yeah.
in terms of jobs, in terms of money, in terms of debt, in
Yeah.
terms of the ability to compete as a manufacturing superpower, all that vitality of America has been drained away by China.
Yeah.
So if America had, if or the West had a certain degree of muscularity that came from technological and industrial might, all of that has been drained away by China,
Yeah.
and that has been coinciding with that is all of these scarab beetles from the Middle East that have swarmed over the West. So to become obsessed with the scarabs that are swamping you from the Middle East, while not being as concerned about China, is going to lead us down a path of bitterness without result. I would say that.
You make a great point, and you know what? I'm guilty of that myself. I know China's a problem. I see it as an issue. I don't understand it as much, but my business is also dependent upon China. A lot of
There
my
you go.
products come from China, and
Right.
I've even noticed here in India. I don't do business here in India. I run my Canadian business from my computer here. I have
Right.
resellers in New Zealand and in Canada, but my products come from China. Now, I wish I could get them from India. I would
Right.
much rather
I agree.
do that. I mean, I think it would be, and I
You
feel
see, the
almost
reason
I
the
almost
reason
feel bad about it in my heart because I think what the West or America needs to try to do, and what you mentioned earlier about Trump's pick and who he's getting to represent at the UN, it gives me hope because we can choose India. We can
right.
help India be that that producer to help and in not a way that hurts the U.S. But in a way that helps the U.S. and helps India. Because I mean, India is at such an amazing time right now. I mean, just the feeling in the air here of how it's growing and how I mean the back to nationalism again. I mean, I think it's great that you guys have a prime minister that's like India first and represents his country and his people on the world stage and in a way that tries to actually help the people. I mean, that's what a prime minister, a president's job is to be. And we can work. True capitalism is me buying something and selling something, and it helps you and it helps me, and it's good all the way around. True capitalism. That's not really what's taken place. I mean, we have a neo-communist capital, China, and America. It's gotten away from its even roots. And what are your thoughts on that, and how you think that we can move, or our leaders can move forward?
Um, so, there is, if we want to have an honest conversation about this issue, there is just no way that we can avoid talking China.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the very interesting things to see just after the elections were over, or just around then, maybe the U.S. elections, just a few days before or after, I'm a little fuzzy now. The Wall Street Journal had a heading, a headline about how if Trump does XYZ against China, your iPhones will cost 20% more. Now, you can just feel the vibrations. I used to be in New York. I was in banking in New York, and you can just feel the vibrations of what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening is that people sitting in Washington, I mean New York, Wall Street Journal is a New York paper, business paper. All of these folks are, deeply invested in business ventures that earn them profits and produce their margins that come from the present business arrangement that the U.S. has with China, or the entire world has with China, and looking to protect their little pie. They argue to the American people that if you support this, your iPhones will cost more. Now, should the present arrangement continue so that the iPhone costs, $80 a month versus $70 a month?
Yeah. Are we willing to, and like I said, I mean, I as an honest person had to even bring that up because that in my conscience bothers me. I mean, I would be willing to pay more and get my products from somewhere else that was better or here or what have you, and charge more or make less. I mean, and it bothers me that these world leaders, because I'm in that same position, but on a way smaller level, they don't even have.
What China has done very effectively, is to make it profitable for the elite of the world, whether they're the political elite, the business elite, the entrepreneurial elite. The term entrepreneurial elite sounds very strange, but if you're an entrepreneur and you have 50 employees, then you really are the elite because those 50 could not do what you do. But what you do feeds their families, so you're elite, even you may not think so. You may drive a truck and wear a baseball cap and be a 10th grade graduate. But if you're employing 50 people, you're still elite because the decisions you make determines what happens at the dinner tables of 50 people.
And you feel that even. I mean,
that
will play into your, choices or your decisions
That's
on
right.
things.
That's right. And China has managed and manipulated its internal economic system in terms of how it manipulates currency, how it puts money into infrastructure or into housing projects or whatever it is. It has deliberately created a system that would enrich the elite of the West and the rest of the world, and bribe them into shifting everything into the economy of China, so that partner with China, you'll be better off, and screw the ordinary guy. That's what China's done, and that has to end.
Yes, it does.
China's going to hurt, and the elite whose wealth has depended on this happening are also going to hurt. That's what Trump was elected for. I'm sorry.
And that's okay, and I support him even though it could and will affect me. That's okay. Because I know that I'm an intelligent enough person that if it went away tomorrow, I'll find a way to do something else if I have to. And the future is more important, really.
It really has come down to, what side are you on? What are you willing to lose from your life, from your pocket, from your privilege, to stand in the fight with your own kind? Because in a liberal world, to be saying your own kind is the worst kind of bigotry you can imagine. But as I said, clash of civilizations. There's the West, and there's China, and there's Saudi Arabia, and that's just the way it is.
And I mean, and when we say that, though, I mean, I include, I mean, when we talk about our own kind, I mean, India is that. I mean, when we talk about Canada and Kiwis and Australians and Indians, I mean, we may be different people or skin color or religion or culture even, but when it came to the big issues about freedom, about what it matters to have a democracy or a republic, that is what the defining thing comes down to.
You're exactly right. This is something that is unappreciated. India is a democracy. And yet it is poor.
The biggest democracy in the world, may I remind some people who may not know.
And it is diverse in a way that Europeans cannot even imagine. Europe is diverse, but they have no idea what diversity means. I mean, as I think back to people saying America is diverse, my God, you have to be in India to know what diversity is.
Yes.
And the thing is that if you look back to 1979, China's economy was smaller than India's, and today. We are nowhere near where China is. China is, pushing America, and we're nowhere near. So, if democracy could
And it's
not
not like
deliver.
they don't have the human capital or all the other
That's right.
tools needed
So,
to be in the exact same position.
but here's what I want to touch on, Chris. The thing is, you would ask that what good has our democracy done us if China has, a greater level of prosperity, wealth, human development indices, education, all of that. If they're all better than India, then what has our democracy done for us? And this is a very important point because uh, what we have is freedom.
Yeah.
We what we have is that nobody can go to the prime minister's office, occupy the prime minister's office, and then not go when the people say go.
Yeah.
See, this is freedom. And from that comes all kinds of things that we can say, we can demand, we can wish, we can change. We choose the course of our destiny.
Yeah.
And if that makes for a meandering course because we are so diverse
Yeah.
and consensus is so difficult to reach
Yeah.
and makes our progress slow, that's okay. Because if democracy is all that,
Yeah.
the day China has to democratize,
Yeah.
China will go back 500 years because they have not yet gone through the difficulty and the pain of figuring out how to make the people's will institutionally functional. That you go to the people, there is a mandate, there is
Yeah.
a vote. Then when they vote for someone else, you hand over power.
Yeah.
That China has not yet earned, and
No.
either we assume that China is never going to have to earn it, in which case why are we bothering a democracy for?
Yeah.
Or China will someday have to democratize, and the day that China has to democratize, the mirage that we see today of the great China will disappear,
No,
because we know what it takes to become a democracy, and they don't.
you make such a great point, and I think what I hope a lot of anyone who will watch this in the future, especially from the West, may not understand is that, I mean, India, this has only started since 1948. I mean, India only got its independence not that long ago. And I
That's right.
mean, with the amount of people here, and like you said, the culture and all the different languages and not to mention a neighbor that hates you. I mean, and it's not made it easy for you, that's been funded by America, that's supposed to be a country that shares your values. And that's something that really bothers me that I don't think people from back home get at all, is that you guys
The,
have,
the biggest the biggest fraud that has been perpetuated on the world is the idea that Pakistan is a legitimate country
yeah,
that has a relevance and a right to exist in and of itself,
yeah. Now,
right?
can you touch
So
on
what?
that and the
Sure,
history?
sure. So the way the world is embroiled in a conversation about the right of Israel to exist.
Yep.
No one asks this question about Pakistan, even though it should be asked.
Yeah.
So, very briefly, in India used to be not one country, but how do I put it? Think of it as Europe. There were 500 plus kingdoms here, some great, some small, some large, some huge. Uh, uh, but they broadly shared, they broadly were as in a continuum of history and culture and religion and tradition that made them one, even though they were divided up into separate, you know I, I, I don't want to say political, but let's say political entities, kingdoms and states and all of that.
Yeah.
And the this we had an emperor called Akbar, who was a Mughal, and Akbar was perhaps the richest man in history. When I say richest, I don't mean personally wealthy. I mean that he was the monarch with the most powerful empire that the world had ever known up to that point, in terms of wealth and architecture and artists and military and the economic system that he oversaw. And the Europeans didn't even know it because they were in the Dark Ages. So India had an experience of Islam and of Hinduism and conquest, and uh, the uh, the Muslim rule was displaced by the imperial English when they showed up. And when the English started to have a debate, we tell ourselves that we fought for our independence and we won our independence, and we did, but we also benefited from the end of the imperial model in the world that the Second World War brought about.
Yes.
We did. And
The decline of the colonial power of England.
well, it wasn't so much that; it was that of course England was declining as an imperial power, but the Second World War ended the empires of all the other powers. France
Yes.
lost its empire, Germany, Belgium,
Yeah.
Spain, they all lost their empires, and England then voluntarily or under pressure from the United States also wrapped up its empire in the post Second World War time frame. But the important thing here is that decades before then, Britain had already started having a debate internally of how to conclude to wrap up their empire in an orderly way, because for whatever reason. Um, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. What was your question? I'm sorry.
Well, just to touch on the history
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's right. So the thing is that when the vibrations in the air of India came that the end of the empire is coming, whether it's because the English are becoming weak, or whether it is because we are gaining strength and our efforts are going to yield results, whatever it is, there was a time when India was very clearly going to become free. And at that time, a very large number of Muslim Nawabs, royalty, became concerned that once the British left, India would become a democracy. And then the Hindu majority population would have democratic say, and these elite royals, Muslim royals, could not stomach the idea of having to live as ordinary people under the rule of what they would say were lesser idolatrous
Yep.
infidels.
They said they would be discriminated against by
Oh,
the Hindu
yeah,
majority.
yeah, sure. That, and that they would not have rights and they would be oppressed and blah, 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 blah. Now, the thing is that, as I mentioned, India used to be a conglomerate of very many countries, very many states, and the UK, Britain had united them all under, for its own convenience,
Yep.
into one unit, which is the India that we see today, almost. And this place had areas that were Muslim majority, and it had areas that were Hindu majority. Now, the places that were Muslim majority were perfectly content, and there was perfect peace and harmony in those areas, such as Punjab and all of that. But the places where the Muslims were in a minority, but were the elite, the
Yeah.
rulers, uh, they did not relish the idea of a democratic India. So they engineered a revolt in the Muslim population of India in the hands of a man called Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who made it his business. He was originally a secular Indian Muslim, and that's another story. But this guy went around on speeches. He joined the Muslim League, and he went around all over India, to everywhere where there were Muslims, and told the Muslims that when the partition, when independence comes, you're going to be screwed.
Yeah.
And he whipped up communal fervor and hatred and paranoia to such an extent that what he thought was a gambit. I understand that it was a gambit in order to extract very large concessions from any future Indian republic about the status of Muslims. And Nehru was unwilling to concede anything that would give any special status to anyone, because he wanted a true democracy. And the game of trying to, you know, Jinnah was playing Russian roulette, and it ended up in a situation where he could not backtrack, and India got partitioned. And as it happened, the places that became Pakistan, which is Punjab and Sindh and Bengal, were the places that were Muslim majority and had not wanted Pakistan. And the places where the people had wanted Pakistan, they ended up in India. So a huge exchange of populations took place. And Pakistan ended up in the hands of these Nawabs, the Muslim royalty from UPCP provinces of India, who then turned Pakistan into an Islamo-fascist fortress to defeat and destroy India someday and retake back their ancestral right to rule India.
Now, was
So
this
this,
not the biggest mass migration of people at that time, or in history, over 1 million
it,
deaths?
Now, I'd say human history. About 10 million people
Yeah.
had to move.
And
You know,
over a million dead, correct?
that's the most conservative estimate.
Yes.
And you know, the slaughter was unbelievable. There's a book by Khushwant Singh that I would encourage everyone to read. It's called A Train to Pakistan, and it describes scenes of trains running between Lahore and Amritsar. Lahore is now in Pakistan, but both cities are in Punjab. They were sister cities,
Yep.
just 30 kilometers apart, and trains were running between Lahore and Amritsar. And these trains would leave one station and they would arrive at the other side with every single person on the train, thousands of people hacked to death. And only the train driver was allowed to go through. And my mother's dad, who was a freedom fighter, has recounted to me stories of seeing these trains pulling in, dripping with blood. You know, this is stuff out of horror movies.
Yeah.
But this happened. Millions and millions of people faced such savagery. And that is the state of Pakistan, which then has fought 4 wars against us,
Yep.
fomented terrorism in Kashmir and Pakistan, and backed the Taliban and tried to control Afghanistan. These are the guys who have they sheltered the people who brought down the World Trade Center
Yep.
in New York. Pakistan is a country that has very effectively saved the Taliban from the United States. It has taken nuclear weapons from China and ballistic missiles to deliver them from North Korea. So this is a rogue nation that has played a very skillful diplomatic game with the West. That,
Yeah.
I'll be useful to you, be nice to me, and in the meantime become a global
And
center.
totally used them in the sense
That's right.
that, I
That's right.
mean,
That's right.
especially after bin Laden was found to be,
That's
harbored
right.
there.
That's
I
right.
mean,
That's right.
that
That's
should
right.
have been totally shut down. And that's another thing I'd like to mention just briefly, quickly, is that I'm not sure why Pakistan's not on that list yet. I saw a tweet from Tariq Fatah that made me think, you know what? Wow, that kind of makes sense. Maybe there's, a step ahead thinking to that. But America has been used. And what I find sad is that America and India share, democracy and freedom and these values, yet,
Let me answer that. Pakistan practices a kind of statecraft that is infused with deceit and treachery. This is a kind of statecraft from medieval times that has served the Muslim world very well in its heyday.
yeah,
So if you read stories of how Muslims dealt with each other in Afghanistan or in Central Asia or Baghdad, or what the understanding that they had with each other of who you trust. And for example, if I was just reading a book about how Gilgit and Baltistan were included into the British Empire and then to India, and the story of how the succession of a king amongst the brothers was decided by fratricide, brothers killing each other. So how do you grow up with kids, reach
yeah,
adulthood, be heirs to the throne, and yet maneuver the situation such that you come out ahead while your brothers lie killed because of you? It requires a degree of deceit and treachery and deception that is so sophisticated that the Americans don't even know what they're dealing with.
yeah.
Pakistan has taken America for an incredible ride and come out ahead, and the Americans can't even imagine being taken for a ride by a podunk little tin pot little country. But it's happened.
Yeah,
Um,
and to the degree even that the general public of America and even Canada have no idea of what any of it even is. I mean,
that's right.
I didn't know anything really about it until the last year or two. Once I came to India and started doing some research and trying to look into the history, and I always knew that there was an issue. I mean,
See,
but
if I'm sorry for interrupting, but if
no
you
problem.
went back to say 2000, if you went back to say 2002 or 2003, and you went to internet forums that were populated by Pakistani nationalists, militarists and nationalists, and you paid attention to how they talked, and after you got over your shock at the clarity of their thinking and hatred and dislike for the West and the things they imagine, and then you looked at what was actually happening in Iraq and what Wolfowitz was doing and what Paul Bremer was doing, it was so clear that the Americans have no idea of what they're doing and what is coming to them and what is going to happen to them. And every single thing that I saw in those days about what Muslims are going to do to the West have come true
Yeah.
today. And the reality is that the West has been completely outplayed by Pakistan and Saudi Arabia and China. That is our reality, and Donald Trump is here to fix that. And the thing is, you said that Pakistan is not on that list. It's very simple. Pakistan is not on that list because if Pakistan goes on that list, America loses all leverage in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
America has military presence in Afghanistan still. Those people need to be supplied. They need to be pulled out. They have
Yeah.
equipment, planes.
Yeah.
You know, all of that will get stranded if Pakistan gets upset.
And people
And
don't
so
understand.
Pakistan,
I don't think people understand how smart Trump is. I mean, the media play him like he's kind of like this dumb
that's
guy
right.
who doesn't
That's
know
right.
what he's talking about. And he's an idiot and stuff. But I mean, the guy is crazy smart, and I think he
Yeah,
knows this new world order agenda and has known it for like
he's
years
driving
and
it.
years.
Driving it. Yeah.
I mean,
And I think Trump is going to fix Pakistan, but it is not going to be anything as obvious as what we have seen so far. So I'm hopeful.
I'm hopeful on that because that is a big question. The media is pushing that right now. Oh well, how come Pakistan and Saudi Arabia are not part of it? But then ignoring, almost trying to delegitimize the other seven countries. I mean, the other seven countries would still be part of that list. That's how they control the narrative. Instead of that pointing out the obvious, well, those seven countries would still be part of that list. I mean, so
That's
let's
right.
just
That's right.
add
Look,
two
it's
more, add three more. I mean, it's almost trying to
see
delegitimize the thing, and it's ridiculous.
what Trump just did was pretty brutal, right?
Yeah,
Now let's say you're just an American, you're just an average guy, an immigrant like 50 million other immigrants,
yep,
and you just happen to be visiting home, or you were on a business trip to London, or you were vacationing in Cancun, and suddenly you can't go back in your home, in your life, in your family, is everything there. Now where do you go?
yep,
Honestly, what Trump has just done is brutal.
yeah,
But the thing is, I put myself in a position when I was in the U.S. and I go home for Christmas or something, and now I can't go back, and I have become so Americanized that I have no life anywhere else,
yeah.
and suddenly it's all over. It's brutal. However,
No,
what
and I
Trump
agree.
has what Trump has signaled is that he's serious. He's
Yep.
not messing around.
No,
So
and
anybody
yep.
anybody who thinks he's messing around had better wake up. You
And,
know.
and I mean, we're on a weekend right now. I think it's going to get dealt with. There has been someone that's been released, but the way the media is pushing it, I mean, here's the thing. When I lived in New Zealand, I was an
Look, I
immigrant.
would not, if I may interrupt.
Yep.
I just want to finish with my thought. And
Yes,
now
yes,
there's a court injunction against what Trump has done.
yes.
Um, I would not be surprised if that was also pre-planned in order to allow whoever is outside to get back before a new way is found to shut it down. So, like, if you're out, get back. We're serious. It's been signaled.
Yeah.
Now, everybody better be clear that we're serious. So, I think that's what's going on right now.
And
Anyway, go ahead,
his
please.
whole week was that. I mean, that's the other
Right.
thing. His whole week has been that. I mean, and that's what people aren't getting too. No one is used to a politician actually doing what they said they were going to do. I mean, I'm even surprised that he is doing as much as he's doing
Look.
before this happened, let alone now. I'm
Here's the
just
thing.
like, whoa.
Here's the thing. We are told that leadership is the ability to bring people to the table, right?
Yep.
The thing is that that's not leadership, that's politics.
Yeah.
Leadership is getting people to follow you to the table.
Yeah.
And Trump is not a politician, but he is a leader. He's sitting at the table, he set the table, and people are going to come and sit at his table by his rules. And
Yep.
that's leadership, and that's what we're looking at.
Well, and this is probably, and this is really politically incorrect to say, but it's truth, and I want to know what you think about it. Is people? Let's look at human beings in general, and like high school, and I mean, it's human psychology. People respect strength and power, and to some people, there is no difference between respect and power, or fear and respect. I mean, to me, there's a difference between fear and respect. But to some people, there isn't. And people will pretend to respect out of fear. And if you look at human beings, see, we have this in the West, especially this idea of that, it's imperialism's bad, or the Americans are bad, or the white man's bad. We're all human beings, and human beings have been involved with barbarism from day one. It's just the human heart. There's a defect in us. Now, that power that people respect or fear or what have you. That's what makes leadership. Now, it can obviously go way too far the other way. I mean, we saw that in Nazi Germany. We saw that
Sure,
with
sure,
Stalin,
sure,
etc. Right? But
sure. Mao, 50 million dead, 50 million. So, no, look, you're right. Now, here's where we go to this cultural Marxism bit. Um, the, the, some people like, a scary leader because that's their personal tendency to respect, power that they cannot control.
yeah,
There is also a cultural paradigm towards strength. So, Russians probably tend to like Putin just because it's a cultural paradigm in Russia to like strong men.
yeah,
I don't know. I'm just hypothesizing.
yep,
But what I'm trying to get at is that what explains Trump is that he's not a Hitler-like character, even though many people are trying to make that argument.
yes,
What we're looking at is that liberalism, as I shouldn't say liberalism, I'm a liberal. I'm a classical liberal in the Winston Churchill, George Washington sense.
yeah.
Um, uh, but what we're looking at is that,
Political correctness.
yeah, so the thing is, I want to get away from the term political correctness and to call it what it is. And what it is to say that Western civilization is about being good and kind and inclusive to those who are outside it. And that's okay. That's wonderful. That is the inclusion of Western civilization. But
Yeah,
the day that we have arrived at a place where Western civilization, it has become bad and wicked for the Western civilization to uphold itself.
yeah.
And that's just not going to work.
And when that falls, I mean, people do not want to see the world that will come after
That's right.
that. I mean, that
That's right. That's right.
if they think
That's right.
America's bad, or they think, I mean, they have no clue, and that's the thing. A lot of people don't
We,
remember that what true totalitarianism is, and I think Trump is just trying to
you
get back to
look,
what
look,
America was supposed to be.
look, you're absolutely right. We live in Pax Americana,
Yeah.
and the world lives in Pax Americana, and before that was Pax Britannica.
Yep.
And the reality is that the modern world today is its order and what is right and wrong, and in terms of justice and whether there's constitutional democracy or whatever, is broadly a European idea, but more specifically an Anglo-Saxon interpretation of it, which is England, Canada, U.S., Australia, New Zealand.
Yeah.
That is the the power axis that determines how the world is running today. Now, the reality is this: if this axis goes down,
Yeah.
and the Pax Americana, the Pax Britannica, if that piece ends,
Yeah.
then what China and Saudi Arabia and India will do, and Russia and
Yeah.
Germany and Brazil will do in that environment,
Yeah.
based both on the threats they face and the opportunities that they see, will be an absolute catastrophe.
Yeah.
So those who are saying that Trump is actually a return to 1930s Europe are actually being ridiculous, because as I said earlier, the West in a situation to now defend it or lose it.
Yeah.
And if it is lost, then the
Then what
world
fills the vacuum? I
the
mean,
world goes to hell.
yeah.
You know, we then go back to a
And it's true, and I think that this new left, I'll call it, I mean, and this shaming and this name calling and not being able to have an exchange of ideas. It's like they can't win the intellectual battle, so they have to go to tactics that are just end the oh, well, you're a racist, and then just shut their mind or something. And it's like, man, I mean, we are fighting for something that's real here. And I don't want to fight you over it. I'm just trying to talk to you about it, to try to get you to look at things maybe in a different way. And that's why I want to do this show. I mean, I did a show a few years back when I was very anti-government, tear the system down type of guy, I mean, world government, etc.
You're getting what you wanted. It's just not in the shape that you thought, but what you were looking for was revolution, and the revolution has arrived.
Well, yeah, and what I failed to realize then, though, is how good the system really was. I bought into that leftist lie that it's Western civilization is bad, and we're all. I mean, that's a lie. we have a great thing that needs to be that needs to be defended. We have a good.
You're exactly right. Now, here's the thing. What is right and good about Western civilization has to be recognized and defended.
Yes.
But the reason that we have arrived at this place is that the West has acted in ways that it has betrayed itself.
Yes.
And when I say it's betrayed itself, I don't just mean the cultural Marxism of, favoring Muslim immigrants over, women getting abused by Muslims in China. It's not just about the cultural Marxism.
Yeah.
It is fundamentally about how America has, since the Second World War, been going to war when it should not have, in places it should not have,
Like
causing.
the things we've been talking about, like focusing on, say, Iraq when Pakistan
We just
should have
see.
been.
Let's just poke a bear here, right? Now, we just talked about how India is a democracy, and what a difficult exercise in democracy is, and how the world is really divided between democracies and non-democracies, which is what we're talking about here.
Yep.
But let us remember that Saudi Arabia, that Iran had a democracy that Britain and America destroyed for their own interests.
Yeah.
Let us not forget that, and they did it while they made friends with Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
So Saudi Arabia got rich and powerful and buggered up the world, and democratic Iran got put in a jail and put under the boot of a Shah who came down on dissent and freedom of speech and freedom of expression with such force that the only people able to resist him and still maintain a force were the clerics, because he could not rein in the clerics. And the clerics then became the only other force that could resist him, and then caused a revolution and took over and turned Iran into an Islamo-fascist state. Now, the US did this, and from that day to today, instead of acknowledging this mistake and this error and this betrayal of democracy and favoring of Saudi Arabia, Americans go on and on and on and about, oh, you're making peace with Iran. Oh, shut the hell up, man.
Yeah.
Because if you don't fix Iran, in the Muslim world, the only people who can take down Saudi Arabia is Iran. If Saudi Arabia is a problem, recognize it. Stop being bribed by them. Help fix Iran, and they kick their butt. So that has happened, and I'm very happy about it. Iran got excused from those sanctions. And we are looking at an upcoming internecine war between Iran and Saudi Arabia are going to be at each other's throats.
What I worry about right now, and I'd like your opinion on this, because geopolitics there's so much going on, and it's hard to keep, is Israel in this. I mean, is Israel and Saudi Arabia seem to be in a lot better relationship now, and I mean this is
something you've touched on, and I'll probably get into a lot of trouble for saying this. Somebody will probably say that you're anti-Semitic and blah 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 whatever. But actually, I have a great deal of admiration for Israel. I would say that Israel is a very smart country collectively. If you notice that the one Muslim country that has nuclear weapons that America cannot control or even reliably secure is Pakistan. Pakistan is filled with anti-Israel and anti-Jew rhetoric and narrative. And yet Israel is not the slightest bit concerned about the threat that it faces from Pakistan's nuclear weapons, nor is America concerned. No one who is so obsessed about Iran's nuclear weapons is worried about the threat that Israel faces from Pakistan's nuclear weapons. Why is that?
Yeah, why?
Why? Because the fact is that no Muslim Sunni country will touch Israel without Saudi Arabia's permission. And Saudi Arabia will not give that permission. So Israel and Saudi Arabia have a friendship and an understanding that was based on collectively having America crush Iran. Now, Iran being Shia and not Sunni was not party to this. Now, what Iran has been doing, as I understand it, I'm no expert, is that having been isolated so successfully by Saudi Arabia and the US, the clerics of Iran found that they could keep their ground in the Muslim world and not get overwhelmed by by Sunni hatred, is by picking on Israel, who was hated by all Muslims.
Yes.
So while Saudi Arabia, I shouldn't say all Muslims, but Islamists.
Yes, all Islamists.
Right. So now if Saudi Arabia is keeping all Muslims and all Islamists in check from hurting Israel, then Iran can, by throwing rocks at Israel, can earn a degree of acceptance from the Islamists of the world and therefore keep itself safe from all the Sunnis who want to slaughter the Shia. Now, that makes Iran an entity that is outside the arrangement that Saudi Arabia and Israel arranged for their own security and benefit, with America acting as their bulldog. And that has ended. And I think that I am not privy to anything, but I'm willing to bet that the understanding between America and Iran is that don't touch Israel and you will be fine.
Yeah.
And I think Iran is going to stick to that. I think Israel is safe from Iran, but I think Iran is going to cause trouble for Saudi Arabia. And I think that's a good thing, because Saudi Arabia needs its butt kicked from whoever is determined enough to do it.
And that's where I get confused, because I used to be pretty anti-Israel. I mean, I used to read the ad busters, and I was like, like one of those leftists that was like,
no, look, I'm pro Israel.
In the West, man. I mean, there is a real serious, on the universities, it's openly anti-Israel. I mean, in the media even, it's everything's anti-Israel.
That's all wrong, because in the larger size scheme of things, Israel is on our side.
Well, as the last few years went on, and I started to look into the history and I mean, Israel's a liberal country, like Canada, like America. I mean, they're a technology country. Yeah, they have their IDF, but they have to. I mean, they're a teeny little sliver of a country.
Let's look at the hypocrisy of the left, right?
Yes.
Pakistan had, Bangladesh, the civil war of Pakistan, which is 1971. Pakistan sent its military into civilian areas of East Pakistan when the rebellion happened. And in a period of just 2 or 3 or 4 months, 3 million people were killed, raped, slaughtered by the Pakistan army. It was to the extent that battle tanks were showing up in university campuses where students were hiding, and tanks were firing shells at dormitories where students were taking refuge. That's what Pakistan has done.
Yeah.
Pakistan has, that kind of thing is continuing in Balochistan. Pakistan-sponsored terrorists have done this in Kashmir. The leftists are with Pakistan and with the Islamists and with the Kashmiri separatists and do not question, well, what have you done? Yeah. Similarly, in Darfur and Sudan, Arab militias slaughtered 500,000 black Muslims because of supremacist attitudes of Arabs towards the blacks.
Yeah.
No protests. So all kinds of really grotesque. I mean, just look at the numbers we're talking about.
Yeah.
3 million, 500 million, no, sorry, 500,000, the numbers we're talking about are staggering.
And you're talking about the left here in India that are silent.
I'm talking about those folks who show up with flotillas to protest against Israel.
Yes, all across the world. I mean,
that's right. These ships, ships are laden with, goodies of Palestine. And everywhere is like, so, I mean, there's this lady, I forget her name now. She's a prominent LGBTQ activist, leader, and I forget her name now. I'll have to look it up. She's also an academic at one of the premier universities of the U.S.
Yep.
And she said that, now this is some years ago. She said that we have to recognize Hamas as a legitimate part of the global left.
Yeah. No, I mean.
Now these guys will throw you off the 10th floor building and they will hang you. Their friends are murdering and slaughtering in the millions, and you want to say they're part of the global left?
Well, I think, and that raises a good point, is that, and the Islamists have recognized this, and ISIS even talked about this recently, that they will merge and use the hard left and use the anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian marches at universities to help recruit these hard anarchist, leftist type anti-Israel people and use them to that same end that serves their same need. And we talk about a teeny little sliver of a country that really, right after their independence, were really attacked by, I mean, in 1968 war, we got 3 huge countries almost all coming at Israel at once. And I see
That's exactly right.
I see a lot of parallels in in the history of
Look. Let me put an idea to you. The best thing that happened. No, let me rephrase that. The post Cold War, the post Second World War liberal left is the best thing that happened to Islamists.
yeah,
Because the liberal left idea was that you would not judge anyone for their culture and their values, because such judgment is what leads to imperialism and the genocide of the Jews, and so you do not want to act as cultural supremacists and look down or criticize anyone else for how they are. Now, this is a wonderful idea. The reason that I'm not a boy standing outside an English club despite not being white is because of this ideal.
yeah,
However, if in the world you have a force like the Islamist who is looking to be legitimized despite being completely illegitimate in the modern world, what greater gift did he need than that?
yeah,
So the left has legitimized on the name of pluralism and multiculturalism and tolerance and non-judgment of cultures, have embraced put into a cobra in their bed.
yeah.
And this nexus of the left and the Islamist radical has brought us to where we are. Brexit and Trump are that,
What
and
I have a hard time
now it's going to
understanding
break up.
is how easily forgotten never again is, though. I mean, if if part of that idea came from what happened in Germany and in the 6 million Jews killed, how come it's so easily forgotten now, to the point that I openly see contempt for the Jewish people all the time, and nobody thinks any. I mean, I've even heard and seen Jews and Zionists compared to Nazis. I mean, with instead of a Nazi patch on the arm, it's a Star of David Zionist patch on the arm. I mean, openly at universities, and I mean, it's pretty much Jew hatred, and nobody cares about it. I mean, it's actually encouraged by the universities almost.
I wouldn't say it's encouraged by the universities, because I don't. So let me answer this point. What I have found in the U.S. is that liberal arts departments, such as anthropology and all of that, are populated by folks who presume whose minds are already made up, and they come to academia not to discover the truth, but to make their truth look as if it has been academically discovered and validated.
Yeah, yeah,
And these folks, if you dig into their personal histories, they turn out to be friends or lovers of Islamists. I'm sorry to go into such grubby territory, but I have found this to be true. For example, we are having the Jaipur Literary Festival here, which is a very big festival. Literary festival here, very premier, and it was very respectable. And it turns out that Salman Rushdie is not welcome here. It turns out that Taslima Nasreen is not welcome here. It turns out that Tariq Fatah is not welcome there. But the people who are welcome there are those who are writing history books, whitewashing the brutality of the worst Muslim tyrants that India had.
yeah,
This kind of nexus of the left and the right, excuse me, I got sidetracked. So if you look at the people who are being invited, the apologies that I mentioned, if you go into social media and you see who they're connecting with, you find that they're connected to, they're historians, and they have their friends are anthropologists at Harvard or Yale or whoever. And then if you know them personally, then you find out that they are the wives and husbands and lovers and friends of people who are doing pro-Islamist propaganda in Kashmir.
yeah.
So there is this nexus of the Islamist and the liberal arts academic in the West that is the exemplar of this nexus of the corrupt left and the Islamist that is now going to break up because of Trump.
Yeah.
My disappointment is that I thought that after Trump's election, that the left would really stop and think, how could it happen?
Yeah.
How could this have happened? And that we would then start to see a reconsideration and a rebirth. Hillary's gone.
Yeah.
Her minions are gone. The game's over. And now the rest of us who are standing around will now get together and say, okay, where did we go wrong?
I still hope that happens, but man.
But here's what I'm finding. It's not. What I'm finding is that these folks
It's getting
These
dirty.
folks intend to. These folks are going to fight it to the end,
Yeah.
and that means that it's going to be ugly and dirty and wicked
Yeah.
and vicious.
Yeah.
And because they will not reconcile, the side that has won has to not defend its victory. So things are now going to get pretty ugly. Buckle your seatbelts. That's all I can say.
Yeah, because there's no trying to, for
But if I may, Bernie Sanders just a couple of days ago tweeted congratulations for the Islamist hijabi who started the Women's March.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a woman who is cursing Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who is one of the bravest Muslim women in the world, who is a campaigner for Muslim women's rights and exposing what happens to women in the Muslim world, including female genital mutilation, which is essentially they slice off the clitoris of little girls so they can never have an orgasm, essentially turning them into nothing but baby machines.
Yeah.
They're not human beings.
Yeah.
So Ayaan is going around the world attacking that. And the SPL Center, Southern Poverty Law Center, issued a list in which they included her as one of the leading hate mongers of the world. This woman, Linda Sarsour, who led the Women's March, an Islamist, hates on Ayaan Hirsi Ali and says that she wishes she could take away her vagina and hates the fact that she's a woman. And Bernie Sanders just tweeted support for this woman.
And tweeting out pictures with the finger in the air, the Islamist,
Right.
I mean, and that's what's so. And I mean, for a news media that has billions and billions of dollars, why can't they? Why is it up to guys like you and me who are sitting here talking, or guys like Alex Jones who they demonize, or a lot of the alternative media who have basically came up out of nowhere, who, I mean, when there's all these resources that are being squandered to push this narrative.
Look, it's like this. It's a revolution. It's a revolution against the establishment, and the establishment includes CNN, it includes the New York Times, it includes The Economist, it includes the traditionally conservative organizations such as the Wall Street Journal, because they're all in it together. Now, here's the thing. The reality is, this sounds like, one of those conspiracy nuts. We know man never landed on the moon, that kind of conspiracy, that they're all the same man, but they really are.
Yeah.
Because behind the scenes, the Republicans and the Democrats, behind the scenes, they deal with the same people in the defense industry. They deal with the same people in Wall Street boardrooms. The same people in embassy diplomacy in embassies of Washington and China, and they represent a united face. But then it's like this entity puts on these two puppets, and Democrat, Republican, and they go dan like that for the benefit of the voter, and that has all been brushed aside now. And
yeah, but it's still happening. They're still doubling down, like you said. I thought that maybe there would be some self-reflection,
but there isn't, right?
No, there's not. It's just getting darker and worse.
And that's okay. And that's okay, because you and I are not establishment, right? They are the establishment. CNN is the establishment, and we get a chance to be heard and have our voices heard because the establishment has to be fought, and we are the revolutionaries fighting the establishment. That's okay.
And thankfully, we have this technology. And what something I want to touch on is, I mean, what really bothered me about last weekend and these marches all across, the world, really, is, I mean, when I was younger, I kind of come from, punk rock a bit, and it was Rage Against the Machine. That there was a band even, right? Rage Against the Machine.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
And now it's like they're raging for the machine. I mean, and it's just, it's craziness. I mean, it's totally crazy. They're raging for the machine.
You see, whatever Rage Against the Machine, whatever we were up to, honestly, those were more innocent times.
Yeah.
The games are over. Let's put away our Tonka trucks. Put away the guitar.
Yeah.
Because there's a war to be won.
No, and there is, and it's an information war, and I mean, I get it.
But it is very important to do this with integrity.
Yeah.
Because too much. I'm sorry to say this, false news things is depressing.
Yeah.
Because if you're righteous, if you're right, then why would you have to lie?
Yeah.
Why would you have to lie? How legitimate can your fight and your battle and your victory be if you have won it by telling lies?
Yeah.
We really do not, nothing that we have said can be accused of being, fake news.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now the thing is that we know that CNN and all are guilty of fake news. Washington Post,
Yeah.
15 days before the election, 15 days before the election, the Wall Street Journal, sorry, the Washington Post had an article saying Trump's chances of winning are Trump's chances of winning are Trump's chances of winning are Trump's chances of winning are